Good afternoon, one and all, and welcome to another afternoon installment of Live at the Waterhole. Um, my name is Liam Burrow, and I'm the very lucky naturalist that's going to be chatting you through a couple of waterside scenes over the next 2 hours. And what an interesting start to the afternoon this is. But anyway, before we get too carried away with all of that, I'd like to remind you once again that we do like to keep these shows as interactive as possible. So please keep your questions, comments, thoughts coming throughout the show. Director Loyanda and myself will be standing by waiting to hear from you. So let's chat all things wildlife. Kicking things off pretty fantastically here in KwaMaritani, here in Pilanesberg National Park, with a very sleepy hippo and a number of terrapin passengers on his back. That is super cool. So the species of terrapin we're looking at here looks like the southern helmeted terrapin, of which we've got a couple of different sizes. The very biggest is probably about 6 inches long. That's not an adult. And the very smallest is obviously a tiny hatchling. But the dynamics on their private island are constantly shifting. Looks like a very, very large hippo bull to me. And we do fairly regularly see this behavior with terrapins kind of utilizing an obligingly positioned hippo as a bit of a platform to bask in the sun. That is fantastic. Now, we don't actually see these, whoops, there they go, these marsh terrapins across much of our low-veld regions, in areas like Djuma, Olifants West, the rest of the Sabi Sands, the Greater Kruger, etc., etc. We see the serrated hinged terrapin. So nice to get a bit of variety. I wonder if they'll be back when this hippo settles a little bit. Hello, Joan Mello. A very good Monday to you as well. Nice to have you on board once again. Hopefully, this is going to be quite an exciting installment. And hello, Caitlin Boss as well. Nice to have you on board. Yeah, kicking off live at the Waterhole with a bit of a bang. Hello, Casper in Milwaukee as well. Nice to have you coming to us all the way from the States. Very cool to think that live wildlife content is arriving in people's living rooms all over the world right now. That's pretty marvelous. The largest safari vehicle on the planet. Thanks, Wild Earth. Pattis says this hippo looks like it's been out of the water a bit with the dry-looking skin on top. Pattis, nice yawn there. Oh, certainly a big hippo bull. Check out those teeth. So Pattis, I don't think this guy has been out of the water for too long, but the skin, while the rest of the hippo is submerged, the skin on kind of the top parts of the back does dry out quite quickly. He would have spent the entire evening last night wandering around here in the Pilanesberg, collecting grass. They are strict grazers, hippopotamuses. But with the arrival of the sun at sunrise, he would have gone back into this water. It's not particularly deep, and it looks pretty tepid, and that's thanks to his droppings. Alrighty, speaking of weather and such things, I think time to see what's in store for us meteorologically. So it looks like some nice cool and perhaps drizzly conditions across much of our sub-Saharan feeds on this particular day. Hopefully a little bit of rain arriving for some of our drier regions. But things not looking all too bad here in Pilanesberg. Quite a bit of greenery on the periphery. So hopefully Pilanesberg has been a little bit luckier than the likes of Madikwe in terms of rainfall this year. But life for this hippo is not all that bad. He's got pretty much all of his needs met. Now, you may be thinking it's perhaps a little bit unusual to be looking at just a single hippo. But for a bull, that's not all that uncommon. So bulls will have to fight for the right to lead a family. Is going for a yawn again. Fight for the rights to lead a family. Fights between males can be potentially very, very serious. Having had a brief look at those tusks, you can understand why. So when bulls fight, they kind of gape, they bite each other, but the vast majority of the damage is done by a horrific set of forward-pointing, stabbing teeth in the lower jaw, and the bulls will quite literally impale one another with those sharp tusks. Yeah, Joan has said, look at those teeth, holy mackerel. Absolutely, Joan. I read a report of a kayaker that was attacked by a hippo a number of years ago, and the wounds inflicted were absolutely devastating. He described a number of beer bottle-sized puncture holes in his chest. He was very, very lucky to survive it. And truth be told, many people in Africa don't. So, hippos are certainly pretty dangerous. Better to give them a wide berth wherever possible. Certainly one of our biggest concerns as safari operators on walking safaris. You definitely don't want to bump into a hippo on land. Alrighty, well, in the interest of keeping things moving, let's have a look at one of our other feeds. Heading over now to Tembe Elephant Park in KwaZulu-Natal. So, over at Tembe in South Africa's KwaZulu-Natal province, right up on the boundary with Mozambique to the north. As its name suggests, Tembe is the home of elephants. Beautiful. A couple of warthogs way out in the background. But my absolute favorite, the elephants are here today once again. They're just bulls by the looks of things, but there are certainly some cows around. So this chap has just done some mud wallowing by the looks of things, scooping up that lovely rich clay, splashing it all over his body. Creates a nice barrier between their relatively sensitive skin and the sun, and that also aids in thermoregulation. It'll help to keep him nice and cool on what is, I'm sure, quite a hot and humid day in Tembe. And a third benefit is that it stops the biting flies that plague elephants. Yeah, a lot of elephant skin is quite thick, well over an inch thick, certainly on the back and parts of the legs. but there are also sections which are paper thin, kind of in their armpits, in their groin, around their genitalia, the eyes, the ears. So they definitely need some help against those flies. And just like that, they were gone. But that's all good. The beauty of this Live at the Waterhole show is that in the absence of any particular action at one feed, we always have the benefit of swapping between a number of live cameras across a selection of very varied African landscapes. Almost like safaring with a teleportation device. It's pretty surreal. Yeah, things certainly looking quite cloudy here at Tembe, cloudy and overcast. So possibly a bit of a cold front and some rain coming in. Rainfall across much of sub-Saharan Africa has been a bit disappointing this year. Comparing shots from satellites last year, same time, to this year, are like night and day. Yeah, certainly this year has been a bit of a disappointment in terms of rainfall. But it's not over yet. We have in the past had times when kind of the biggest deluge of the year has arrived in March. Perhaps a little bit too late though. Casper says, this is the best, watching from faraway places and feeling so close. Thanks for your comment, Casper. Yeah, what a pleasure to be bringing wildlife content into living rooms all over the world. With all the garbage on TV these days, it's nice to watch something actually interesting. There's an elephant. There's an elephant popping out over there. Beautiful. Another sub-adult bull. You'll notice he's got quite a raggedy right ear there. And that's fairly normal for an elephant living in a wild range, free-roaming elephant. The ears take a bit of a hammering with the way these elephants push themselves through thick vegetation. And quite interestingly, those little rips in the ears will never heal. So a bit like a fingerprint for elephant researchers, they will actually plot out the particular pattern in those elephant ear rips, and that can serve as a very valuable and clear ID for an elephant individual. Jagel has asked in regards to elephant trunks functions and where does the water stop. So J.S. Angel, a very interesting question, and there's a bit of a misconception I think given to us by Disney movies and such cartoons that an elephant trunk functions a little bit like a straw, that they can just impel water straight into their system through the trunk. But what you've got to understand is the trunk is an extension of the elephant's nose. So if you imagine trying to drink a glass of water with your nose, that's not really going to function. But quite fascinatingly, an elephant has the ability to draw water up, perhaps as much as 13 liters on a big enough pool. You'll hold it, and then angle the tip of the trunk into the mouth and blast it in through a pretty fascinating system of valves. Yeah, very complex pressure system. And the trunk is made up of about 25,000 radial muscles, all kind of constructed circularly, one on top of the other, and making it one of the most dexterous animal appendages on the planet, without a doubt. Hello, Diane in the UK. Nice to have you on board as well, and a very good afternoon to you too. Maybe this guy will come down and take his opportunity to have a bit of a splash in the mud as well. That's another fascinating thing about the trunk. The elephant can obviously draw water up with it and drink with it as a bit of a tool, but they can also use the trunk to suck up limited amounts of mud and even very fine dust. Imagine trying to scoop up dust with your nose. You would be a sneezing, congested mess. So the fact that the Ellies can do it with no problem at all, pretty fascinating. Catherine says, nice to watch and to help with my bush withdrawals. I feel your pain, Catherine. I've been busy with commercial pilot's license exams for about 15 months now. I've just been getting less and less bush time. Super frustrating. So I feel those withdrawals. Joan Mello asks, with all the blood vessels in an Ellie's ear, do they ever hurt themselves? Joan, they absolutely do. Occasionally in fights they can literally rip one of those ears in half. While I'm sure that isn't likely to be a fatal injury, it's got to be painful. And thankfully the immune systems of most wild animals are pretty formidable things. I've seen animals recover from injuries that would just be devastating. Certainly enough to put a human flat on their back, and animals make recoveries. I guess living in nature, their system of antibodies is far stronger than ours. Nice. So this is not the biggest of elephant bulls. This is probably a 4-ton male. I would estimate him to be somewhere in his mid-20s in terms of age. And he's got quite a bit of growing to do. He won't be fully mature for probably another 10 years. At maximum size, he'll probably stand about 12 foot tall at the shoulder. And if he turns into an exceptional male, he could weigh in excess of 7 tons, probably close to 15,000 pounds. But happily off on his missions there. Head up, ears open, this guy is trying to have a listen. And perhaps he's trying to link up once again with the rest of his bachelor group. Thankfully, he has the ability to communicate via ultrasound, so frequencies far too low to be picked up by the human ear. And so he'll be chatting to other bulls. Even if he loses members of his group over kilometers through the bush, he'll be able to send and receive information. Talk about an elephant social network. Diana says, very thankful for this hour of live content. Diana, wonderful to have you on board with us. And what a pleasure it is to be showing you some of this stuff. The show will be on for 2 hours. We've currently been live for about 20 minutes. The live at the Waterhole program, if you didn't know, is 2 hours. And I'm pretty sure that is the same warthog boar from yesterday. Big adult man. Ellie having a bit of a scratch of his undercarriage there on a low termite mound. So for quite a few of our thick-skinned animal species, things like buffalo, elephants, rhino, and even the warthogs, once they've applied a coating of nice mud to the skin, and they will very often take the opportunity to rub up on an appropriate stump or termite mound to do a bit of exfoliation and detick themselves. And it certainly looks like this warthog has been doing some wallowing himself. Alrighty, I think time now to head over to Tower Lodge on the opposite side of South Africa to see what's happening around the waterhole there. Haha, our old friend the crocodile. So we are once again over at Tau, which is a lodge in Madikwe Game Reserve, right up on the boundary with Botswana to the north. We're taking a look at quite a large Nile crocodile. This guy once again just doing a little bit of basking in the sun. With slightly cloudy and cooler conditions across much of southern Africa today, reptiles are having a bit of a slow day across the board. And his dark skin tells a story. It tells us his body temperature is low. Definitely needs this time in the sun to regulate that temperature, get his energy levels up, and then he can head back into the water and start doing some fishing. Not that he's in any particular need of a feed by the looks of things. That is a very, very chunky looking crocodile, well fed. Crocodilians and many reptiles in general don't need to eat every single day. Their metabolisms obviously operate quite differently to yours or mine. Crocs in particular store quite a substantial amount of fat along their tail, and under very, very tough conditions, if a drought was to fall, this guy could possibly go as long as 2 years without a single bite to eat. Talk about a survivor. I'm very pleased to hear Joan Mello saying that her favourite is the crocodile. They're a very frequently vilified species. I guess a little bit like the hyenas and the vultures and things like that. A lot of people see the packaging and judge them quite negatively. But yeah, everything in nature has value, and I believe all living things have beauty. You've just got to be able and be willing to look at it in the right way. These crocodiles are extremely impressive apex predators that deserve our respect. And I think they're absolutely fascinating. crocodilians as a family, and that is made up of alligators, gharials, caimans. The crocodile that we're looking at are quite unusual amongst reptiles in that they have a 4-chambered heart, so much like ours. Most other reptiles, certainly tortoises, lizards, snakes, have a very simple heart with 2 chambers. And crocodilians also have the frontal lobe to the brain. Most other reptiles, with the exception of the varanids, monitor lizards, have very, very simple brains. Crocs and monitor lizards have advanced cognitive function, just like us. One of the most developed sectors of a crocodile's brain is the frontal cortex, which, and I'm not a brain surgeon, just a neurological expert. To my understanding, that is the part of the brain responsible for formulating plans or forethought. It's well documented that crocodiles will watch a situation. They'll absorb information about a person coming down to the water every single day in the same place. And gradually that croc makes a plan, gets itself into the right spot, and it can launch an ambush. Certainly a little bit frightening. Alrighty, well, time now to visit another one of Live at the Waterholes locations. Let's head up to Olifantswest to Rosie's Pan. So we are live now from Rosie's Pan on Olifantswest Game Reserve outside the town of Hoedspruit. I thought the camera had frozen there for a second, but it seems to have come right. We've got one very impressive looking elephant bull, also having his midday drink. Gio has asked, have we ever seen anything unexpected at the Waterholes? Gio, absolutely yes. Actually, at Rosie's Pan itself, I was doing one of these live safari, or rather live at the Waterholes shows a number of months ago, on quite a cloudy, overcast day. We hadn't had much content at all. We're just looking at birds, the odd terrapin, and then Jared, the director, announced a crash cut to Rosie's. We came in here and watched a pack of wild dogs killing an impala. Amazing. So yeah, you absolutely just never know what you're going to see. And certainly that wild dog sighting here at Rosie's was pretty shocking. As we came live, the impala was in the center of the pan, which is only small, with the pack of wild dogs running around the outskirts. And slowly but surely they put enough pressure on this ewe that I think she tried to come a bit closer to the edge. One of them grabbed her and they pulled her onto the bank and killed and ate her right in front of us. Those sort of sightings are super, super rare. And I think for a lot of people that can be a pretty frightful thing to see, but it is nature. And we're having some slight technical issues with the feed here at Rosie's Pan. I think it's a bit unstable, so we're probably going to find somewhere else to go. Alrighty, time now to head over to Comfort's Dam to have a look at the flamingo colony. So over in Kimberley, we're having a look at our flamingo colony here at Comfort's Dam. not a whole lot going on by the looks of things, everybody napping. Quite fascinating how these flamingos stand on one leg like that. I actually read something recently that it says waterbirds like this, that stand on one leg and fold their head under the wing while they sleep, actually have the ability to sleep one side of the brain at a time. So the side with the foot down is awake, the side with the foot up is asleep, and they'll alternate. It's something to do with their ability to sense danger. Obviously, going into a deep REM sleep, like you or I will hopefully get a couple of times in an evening, and it's far too risky for something as vulnerable as a bird. So this way they can kind of hedge their bets. Pattis says she was live with us for that wild dog sighting. I'm very glad you were. Yeah, amazing. That was just the last thing I was expecting to see on that particular day. Super gory, but when you consider how endangered those African wild dogs are, it's just such a special sighting to see. Hello, Spas. You have asked how long will I be with us, and certainly it is very nice to see these flamingos at Compass Dam. Spas, I'm not on tomorrow. I think Ralph is taking my slot. I'm heading up to Johannesburg to write an exam, pilot's exam, but I will be back with you the day after tomorrow. I think the day after that, and then 2 more days a bit closer to the end of the month. Yeah, and as I get my ducks in a row with this commercial pilot's license theory out of the way, I'm hoping to be doing a little bit more wildlife content for Wild Earth. So with any luck, maybe I'll be on drive at Juma sometime soon. I hope so. Diane says she also watched those wild dogs and it stayed in her memory. It certainly was pretty horrific, Diane, especially noticing that that female impala was pregnant and seeing that little fetus getting eaten. It is something I've seen before with wild dogs. Fairly typical of targeting female impala that are heavily pregnant and a bit slower at that time of the year. Kino has asked with regards to these flamingos and this funny sleep behavior, if they keep both eyes open. Kino, in my observations of waterbirds, I've seen them kind of doing both. So I've seen them resting with one eye open, but also keeping them both closed. Yeah, pretty bizarre. So this Compass Dam setup is quite a special spot for these flamingos. It is very much a sanctuary for these birds who require very particular conditions to actually meet their needs. They feed specifically on blue-green algae and diatoms, which are also a form of algae. And the carotenoids, or the certain pigments in those little microorganisms, are what give the flamingos their lovely colourful feathers. Now, funnily enough, carotenoids are also the pigments in things like carrots and tomatoes that give them their colour. So yeah, the algae has to be present in water for these guys to feed, and the water has to have very specific contents of sodium and minerals like phosphorus, and in order for those things to function. Now, the greater and lesser flamingo habitats, and certainly the spots where they can breed, are under threat in a couple of different places in Africa. But this is a protected sanctuary. Moonbeam Smith says there is a simple explanation as to why they stand up on one foot. If they pull the other one up, they fall down. Thanks, Moonbeam. Sandy Franklin, thank you very much for the luck. I'm certainly going to need it. But the end is in sight. I'm looking forward to having this chapter of my life over and done with now. I'm not an indoor animal, so months and months with my nose in the books has been hard. Diane has asked, do flamingos make noises? And Diane, they absolutely do. So they make kind of a range of honking type vocalizations, a little bit like geese. Yeah, they can be very chatty, especially when they're in a group and certainly when they breed. So this wetland that the flamingos are actually living in is actually artificial. So a very renowned South African ornithologist by the name of Mark Anderson, as well as a local mining company, created this wetland system artificially on land which I believe is owned by one of these mines, in an attempt to give back to the environment a bit. I don't know what's made them all push towards the water there. Possibly some people moving around or something. I don't know. Not quite sure. And yeah, it was initially not known whether or not flamingos would settle here. The ideal hope was that they would reproduce, because so many of the sort of breeding sites are in danger in other parts of Africa. But super. Alrighty, we might leave these flamingos to their feeding and their napping, and let's head over once again to Tembe Elephant Park. And elephant bulls galore here at Tembe. One very big boy kind of exiting the screen on the left there. Now Tembe is quite renowned as a population of elephants with some very, very special genetics. There are a number of bulls in this ecosystem with some of the largest tusks in Africa, rivaling some of those in East Africa and even in the Kruger. This population is very actively conserved, so touch wood, we haven't had too many issues with regards to poaching, at least for the elephants. But in other areas in Africa, poaching has wreaked absolute havoc. The demand for ivory in places like China, Vietnam, even parts of Europe, and quite sadly the United States as well, as kind of a secondary market, have pushed elephant populations into very hot water here in Africa. Sadly, it's reckoned that an elephant is lost roughly every 15 minutes to an ivory poacher in Africa every day. That equates to around about 100 elephants a day. We do have somewhere in the vicinity of 350,000 ellies in Africa, but that is down from around 10 million 100 or so years ago. So pretty devastating stuff. And we certainly have to get in gear and make a concerted effort to stop the scourge of ivory poaching. Thankfully, there's a lot of very brave individuals and sterling organizations doing their best to make a difference. Very, very nice. Now you can see this bull just kind of siphoning the top inch or so of water right off of the surface. That'll be the clearest water available, clearest and freshest. Elephants can be very particular when it comes to drinking. They don't like to drink very dirty water if they have a choice. And with that spray coming out, you can see the behavior we were talking about a little bit earlier. So the elephant has the ability to impel a bunch of water, probably 13 liters or so if he's a big enough bull, draws it up into that trunk, holds it for a second through a system of valves, and then blasts it into the mouth. Shane asks or says, I've read Tuskers are struggling in Tanzania as well, and there are petitions to outlaw the hunting of them there. Yeah, Shane, it is. It's quite the scandal in the wildlife industry at the moment. It's an issue in particular affecting the elephant population of the greater Amboseli ecosystem. Amboseli is a reserve in Kenya, but the population of elephants in Amboseli wanders from Kenya, where they are protected and where commercial hunting is outlawed, across the border into neighboring Tanzania, where hunting is legal. And unfortunately, there are some extremely unethical big game hunting operations in the area, which are now specifically targeting the very largest of Africa's super tuskers. It is an activity that cannot be allowed to go on. It's utterly unacceptable. The value that those largest of bulls have, not only to their own social structures in their own populations, but also to ecotourism, far outweighs any benefits that could be brought to countries financially by killing those elephants for trophies. And there is a petition circulating at the moment. I'll try and find it and post it to my story at Borough Wildlife on Instagram. So yeah, go there and give it a sign. We cannot allow people to pay to shoot the very last of Africa's super tuskers. Totally unacceptable. It's 2024, for goodness sake. Spas has asked, what is the total population of elephants in KwaZulu-Natal? Now, Spas, I'm not entirely sure. I know that there are a couple of hundred here in Tembe, maybe 300 or 400, something like that. But I don't have much more specific knowledge on the subject in KwaZulu-Natal. Certainly in southern Africa, elephant populations seem to be on the rise. Touch wood. The Kruger is now home to probably somewhere between 15 and about 20,000 elephants. and it's increasing. Sure, what a peaceful scene. Yeah, the hunting industry in Africa certainly has its place. It's not something I'd want to participate in. I get much more joy from viewing wildlife and capturing images with a camera. I've never really felt the need to destroy animals. But in certain very remote parts of Africa, where tourism infrastructure is not established, sustainable hunting can be a bit of a management tool. It can generate the revenue needed to conserve areas, to build fences, to pay for anti-poaching aircraft, anti-poaching teams, and it fosters good relationships with the communities, because very often the meat from something like a shot buffalo or a shot elephant can feed hundreds, if not thousands, of people at a time. So it has its place, but we cannot be shooting the last of our great tuskers. As the custodians for the natural world, we as humans have got to do better. It's just not good enough. Zim Dutch has said, good afternoon, do you have any information on the search for the DNA of the Cape lion in Zim? Zim Dutch, I have absolutely no idea what you're talking about, but that's very, very interesting. I do know about the Cape lion. For anybody who doesn't know, the Cape lion was a subspecies of Panthera leo, the sort of normal lion we view across much of the rest of wild Africa. But a unique subspecies which lived down in South Africa's Cape region. It was unfortunately shot out, I believe, possibly in the 16 or 1700s, a couple of hundred years ago. But I wasn't aware that their DNA was possibly in populations of lions in Zim. Zim Dutch, I'm going to have to do a bit more research on that. But yeah, thanks for bringing it up. That's interesting. Peace to Ya, who I believe is a new member. Welcome, Peace to Ya. Nice to have you with us. Says it's disgusting that these beautiful animals can't live in peace without worrying about someone shooting them and taking them from their families. Yeah, Peace to Ya. It is. It's a big issue. It's one of the big reasons why supporting sustainable ecotourism in Africa brings a real potential for a long-term future for our wilderness areas and these wild species. So support lodges, come out on safari. Joan Mello says, I have heard someplace that Africa is trying to give Russia some elephants. Is this true? Joan, I don't have specific info on that, but yeah, it certainly doesn't surprise me. Unfortunately, my home country, Zimbabwe, has got a terrible reputation for, even in recent years, capturing juvenile wild elephants. You can see a hugely traumatic process, separating them from their families and then shipping them off to zoos in China. Without a doubt, a fate worse than death for those animals. Thankfully, some new legislation was passed in the United States recently, within the last couple of weeks, I think, banning the import of live elephants from Africa. And yeah, we've got to put pressure on our governments to put laws like that in place. I don't think we should have elephants in zoos at all, full stop. And I think any zoos that do have elephants in them need to be kind of phasing them out as they get old and as they pass away naturally. We certainly shouldn't be breeding them in there. The issue with elephants in captivity is they're just so big, they need huge areas to range in order to live a happy, healthy life. And probably the most critical factor to their well-being is having the ability to mingle with other elephants. They have to live in herds, they have to meet other elephants. A bit like humans, while you might enjoy a bit of time on your own from time to time, we are highly social animals. Solitary confinement causes mental breakdowns. It's not good for them. You can give captive elephants all the enrichment in the world, all the food and water they need, but they don't live a happy existence. This, on the other hand, is a very happy-looking elephant. And all his needs are met, and he is where he belongs. And what a lovely, lush wilderness Tembe is. But yeah, as this elephant continues on with his business today, I think let's stop back over in a Tau to see what's happening. Very nice. So back over in Madikwe now, up in South Africa's northwest. Things are looking pretty warm. Certainly this family of plains zebra does look quite toasty out in the sun. Whoops, okay, maybe we had some issues with the feed there at, oh no, and we're back. Apologies for that. Now, these zebra are actually remarkably capable of withstanding some serious temperatures. Quite interestingly, we believe that is an effect of their black and white coloration. It's believed there's almost a thermoregulatory balancing effect of those stripes. Obviously, black absorbs heat, white reflects it. So they reckon that assists to kind of regulate the zebra's temperature. And you can see them even on the hottest of our summer days in excess of 45 degrees centigrade, and zebras are out in the open quite happily going about their business. Amazing. Also very little foal in that group, and without a doubt he or she arrived within the last couple of weeks. That mare has got to be careful though. As we know, there are 3 reasonably large crocodiles here. So she's got to be pretty careful with that youngster so close to the water's edge. Yeah, these particular crocodiles might not be big enough to take an adult plains zebra, which is a big animal. But certainly that foal is on the menu. And now these zebra are very clearly equine, so they're in the same family as horses, donkeys, that sort of thing. But as far as these things go, I think their closest relatives in the wild are probably something like the wild ass, which you can find in sort of Saharan Africa, and further north up into quite dry, arid regions. And in terms of domestic comparison, I think the donkey would be the closest. But in truth, if you put a zebra and either a horse or a donkey of the opposite sex together, they can reproduce. And the baby is called a zebroid, which is an unfortunate name. It sounds like a medical condition. Yeah, they're certainly funny looking things. Sandra asks, what sort of temperature is it at Tau at the moment? Sandra, I can't actually remember from the weather exactly what it is, but I don't think it's above high 20s today. We do seem to have a bit of a cold front drifting through much of South Africa, which is fairly standard for this time of the year. We're kind of moving into fall. Even though Africa doesn't really have the 4 seasons, we're kind of gripped by 2 cycles: a cycle of wet, which is our summer, and a cycle of dry, which is our winter. Which we're kind of transitioning between wet and dry at the moment, which I guess could be called fall. Hello, Darkmane Lover. Nice to have a comment from you. Always good to hear a familiar voice. And yeah, it's certainly good to be back with Wild Earth TV. I'm looking forward to doing a little bit more as my calendar gets a bit quieter in the next month or so. Yeah, thank you for your kind words. Just before I was born, my late grandfather purchased quite a large wildlife property in central Zimbabwe, and he and my dad ran it for many, many years. But when they took ownership of this property, there were a number of feral donkeys on the land, and they managed to catch these donkeys and find other homes for them. But a number of months later, out on a drive, they came across a very grey-looking zebra foal that was only partially striped. So confirming that zebroid scenario, it had obviously met with a male donkey at some stage out there. Yeah, and they spoke about seeing this zebroid, this zebdonk, for a number of years before it disappeared. Cheetahs and other animals, says these barcodes are fabulous. Now, certainly cheetahs, some of the most striking patterning of any animal out there, a very iconic African species. And these zebra look like they're heading off back into that fairly arid landscape in search of something to eat. Quite interesting, you'll note that the individual kind of leading this movement out of this area is a mare. And she's the one with that little foal. So as zebra travel, they're actually led by a female family member known as a pathfinder. The stallion, who's the individual at the back there, always walks at the rear. The feeling is that if danger is going to come in the form of another group of zebra, and confrontations between bachelor groups of zebra and these little breeding herds can be brutal. Zebra bachelors, in an attempt to gain mating rights, will kill little foals that don't belong to them, and try and drive out an existing stallion if he's getting a bit old. So yeah, they fight viciously. And I think from the back, that stallion has got the best chance of spotting a roving herd of bachelors coming. But once again, it's the ladies making all the decisions about the important stuff day to day. Where's the safest place to drink? Where's the safest place to go and get some grass? large leading ladies. Hello, prairie dog. Very pretty indeed. I don't think I've ever met somebody on a safari that is not happy to see a zebra. They are some of our most photogenic and frequently requested sights on a safari, that's for sure. And there's our crocs, one on the left of the thorn bush, the water's edge, one on the right. So that's 2 out of 3. Everybody doing some basking. We chatted yesterday at Old Donyo about the effects of climate change on animal populations, and it can be pretty disastrous for the crocodilians. Experts studying alligators in the Florida Everglades are already raising red flags. The big problem with reptiles, and a couple of different groups of reptiles, have something called temperature sex dependency. So what that means is when they lay eggs, and the majority of reptiles do lay eggs, a few give birth to live young, but crocodiles and turtles and tortoises lay eggs in the sand. So they have to come up onto land, deposit their eggs in the sand, bury them, and they incubate for a certain period. But that period and the gender of the unhatched babies within depends on the temperature of incubation. So for crocodiles, warmer temperatures will produce males, cooler temperatures produce females. So ideally a nice balance somewhere in the middle, giving about a 50-50 ratio of both. However, with rising temperatures, in many areas it's thought that entire generations of crocodilians are going to be born male, which might not be an issue now, but in another 20 years when those animals are breeding and there are no females around, that's going to be a disaster. So yeah, we certainly need to be thinking about our carbon emissions. But anyway, let's check in once again at the feed at Old Donyo in southern Kenya. Haha! So we've got our group of rutting impala in the back, as well as a troop of olive baboons. Everybody coming down out into the open for a bit of a drink. These olive baboons are quite similar to the chacma baboons that we might see at some of our feeds. I thought that was a hyena, but it's another baboon. Lots of monkey business here. But yeah, these are olive baboons. They're slightly bigger, slightly woollier. A wonderful sight. They live in a hierarchy with a very well-defined social structure. At the head of the entire sort of establishment are 5 or 6 very large adult males, and one sort of primary dominant male right at the top. But they fight constantly for pole position. Obviously, everybody wants all the benefits that come with being king, being top baboon. And fights can be completely brutal. And they have 4 centimeter long, so almost 2-inch long canine teeth in their upper jaw. longer than that of a lion, which give them the ability to inflict terrible wounds on one another when they do fight. And that's why those teeth have evolved to be that way. Certainly they can rip each other's ears off. They regularly rip off lips. Yeah, all in pursuit of the rights to mate with the majority of the females. It's amazing though, one unwritten rule of baboon behavior is that no baboon is allowed to physically harass or assault another baboon if it's carrying a baby. So when one of these fights breaks out between these males that are quite high up in the rankings, these males will often kidnap a screaming infant from one of the lower ranking females and use it as almost a human shield to prevent any further attacks. It's pretty fascinating stuff. Brutal, but very interesting. And these are the only, or rather the largest of the primates that we would be seeing here at Waterhole. Still, these guys are classed as lesser primates, so in with the other monkeys, gibbons, macaques, that sort of thing. When we talk about great primates, we're referring to the more intelligent, things like things like bonobos, gorillas, chimpanzees, orangutans. Those are the primates that are closest to us. Still though, these baboons have something like 94 or 95% in common with our own DNA profiles. Pretty close. You can see them cashing in on protein-rich grass inflorescence there, grass seeds. Baboons, obviously, much like ourselves, are highly opportunistic and quite omnivorous, feeding on a vast array of plant materials, grass, roots, shoots, fruit, leaves. But then on the more protein-rich side, they'll also take birds' eggs, baby birds, and even, on occasion, baby antelope. I have on 3 separate occasions viewed baboons in the Great Kruger killing juvenile antelope. Baby bushbuck, a daker, and a nyala. Especially for those very large males hoping to develop a bit of muscle and gain strength. I think that protein is pretty irresistible. Nice big male there. And of course the impala rams that we've been looking at lately here as well. Another huge male baboon, perhaps one of the biggest in the group on the left there. And now when there aren't baby antelope around, there's almost a nice mutualism between these impala and the baboons. And they're quite happy to feed amongst one another. I think for the theory, once again, of safety in numbers, obviously they've got very different abilities in terms of sensing danger. Baboons have got something called stereoscopic vision, so highly detailed color vision, a lot like ours. which is phenomenal for giving them the ability to spot a sneaking leopard or lion making its way in. And yeah, who's to say, maybe the impala have a stronger sense of smell or better hearing, so one hand washes the other. But again, that relationship takes a bit of a dark turn when the impala lambs arrive in the summer, and those baboons will try and eat them. So Izzy B says baboons have very large canines for an omnivore, and absolutely they do, Izzy B. Obviously, looking at ourselves, we're omnivorous. We don't have anything even remotely like that. But once again, those canines, while they might be used for eating meat, I think their primary function is as fighting teeth, almost like a hippo's tusks. Quite a cloudy and cool scene here today. More rain on the way, I'm sure. These baboons just gradually starting to move into that woodland, out of sight. But yeah, we've been very, very lucky in getting such a nice view of them. And we don't tend to spend huge amounts of time with these big primates here live at the Waterhole. So any chance to get a little bit of a look into their private lives is always a nice one. While I'm certainly no fan of baboons in a lodge environment, they can be a huge nuisance. They're quite dangerous and very destructive. Out in nature, they are fabulous things. Extremely fascinating to watch. A guide I worked with in the Sabi Sands went on his usual leave. Most of the lodges do like a 6-week on duty, 2-week off duty kind of rotation. And whatever, hopped in his car, went off to his home in Joburg or something, and realized about a week in that he had left the back window to his bathroom open. And in his absence, an entire troop of baboons had got into this room and absolutely trashed it over about 2 days. Destroyed completely everything, opened all the kitchen cupboards, smashed all his plates, his bowls, his cups. And the smell from all of their droppings and everything was so bad they actually had to strip the entire room and repaint it. So, yeah, lesson learned. Check your windows if you live in an area where baboons are found. Lady Macbeth, hello. You've asked in regards to the intelligence of bush babies. So bush babies fall into the same kind of greater group as the baboons. They are lesser primates, but I would say they're on kind of the lower end in terms of intelligence. Where baboons and monkeys still have quite solid problem-solving abilities and cognitive function, bush babies are far more instinctive animals. Still, they are primates, so probably more intelligence than something like an antler. what a magnificent impala ram this guy is. We chatted about it in yesterday's Live at the Waterhole program. But if you missed it, I think the quality of the horns of many of East Africa's antelope over the whole, things like impala, a lot of the gazelle, certainly things like kudu, and into the bovines, looking at things like buffalo. As far as Africa is concerned, East Africa is where you find the very biggest examples. And that's probably to do with the mineral content in the soil out here. Historically, and we're talking hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years ago, East Africa was highly volcanic. And still there are a couple of active volcanoes peppered around the area. But the big benefit historically was showers of volcanic ash, which is very high in critical natural elements like phosphorus, and which inevitably then gets sucked up into the grass which grows on it, or soaked into the water which sits in these water holes. And then the animals obviously take that into their bodies, and in combination with very, very good genetics, and it builds enormous bodies. Possibly one of the reasons the elephants are so famous in these areas for getting so big and developing such large tusks as well. But yeah, that is a very, very big set of horns. Tina Skilton says, such a peaceful scene. And Tina, it absolutely is. Wonderful to spend a bit of time out in nature. It's well demonstrated that it's extremely good for human mental health. Obviously, not everybody has the ability to hop on a safari vehicle every single day, but even if you've got the opportunity just to sit outside in your garden, get a bit of sun, vitamin D is essential for many bodily processes in humans. Very good for our immune system. And of course, just taking your shoes off and getting in touch with green grass and earth, it's good. Good for your well-being. Peace to ya, says bush babies are so stinking cute. Peace to ya, they absolutely are. They're very, very funny little things. Yeah, well, we're obviously very unlikely to get a look at a bush baby on a daytime feed, on sort of sunset safaris out with the spotlight. Occasionally we do spot them. I'm a particularly big fan of the lesser galago, the lesser bush baby that we get in the greater Kruger. They're tiny, sort of only the size of a fist. Could probably sit in a teacup. And there's a ground squirrel moving around in the grass, just out of frame. But those bush babies are phenomenal. When two males meet and decide they want to battle for dominance, they will find a horizontal branch. They stand upright on their hind legs, balancing with their long tail. And they make fists and they box. They have literally a little boxing match. Yeah, super cute. Unfortunately, as a result of their cuteness, I believe they're becoming quite popular in foreign places as pets, with people breeding them in captivity. But they're not wonderful when it comes to a life in captivity. They're exclusively nocturnal, so they come out as soon as you go to bed, and they'll be bouncing off the walls and landing on your face and all of that. And then to mark territory, the males urinate on their hands, which makes them constantly sticky. So yeah, possibly not the most hygienic animal to live with either. So better if you want to see bush babies to see them in the wild. And I'm glad to hear you've seen them on a couple of occasions out on drives. Peace to ya. Yeah, it is usually just a glimpse. They tend to be super shy, and I think their enormous eyes are pretty sensitive to our spotlights. So they tend to just give us a bit of a death stare for a second and then disappear. But always cool to see. And things are looking super lush here at Eldonia. As a result, we probably aren't going to get the density of sightings of large species that we are used to here at Eldonia in the drier months. Seeing those huge groups of eland and fringe-eared oryx and giraffes and things coming through. I'm sure you'll get one or two on occasion. But the fact of the matter is there's lots more food and water spread out across the entire ecosystem. And so the density of wildlife around the waterhole itself is kind of thinned out. But once again, I say it so often here at Live at the Waterhole, it's not all about the big, high-profile stuff. We've also got all the time in the world for the little things. Very, very happy to look at birds and ground squirrels and reptiles, just as often as we are to see elephants and lions. I think that was one of those straw-tailed widers taking off the top of this bush. It did look like it had a very long tail. It's a bit tough to see detail on my feed, especially with quite low light. But those would most probably then be the females, which look entirely different. Yeah, there's the male in the top of that acacia tree. An appropriately named straw-tailed wider, I'm sure, because those long, extravagant tail feathers look a bit like they're made of straw. He will molt and regrow those spectacular feathers once a year, and it's all to do with mate selection. It's to make him, or rather it is, a display of health and virility to the females. Valerie asks, how did I learn how to identify all the birds? Valerie, it's a bit of an ongoing process, and certainly with regards to East Africa, I have pretty minimal experience. I've only been up into this area once, and it wasn't to visit the savannah at all. I went up and did some guerrilla trekking with fellow wild earth naturalist Kelly Oldacre 6 or 7 years ago in Rwanda. So yeah, my knowledge on East African birds is lacking, to say the very least. But at least the more easily identifiable species I can do. Yeah, the birds can be tricky. Pink Ellie says, hi everyone, I'm watching about 15 minutes back. Anyone know the life average span of baboons? Pink Ellie, thanks very much for your question. Offhand, I think the life of a baboon in the wild is probably not likely to see more than about 30 years. which is a pretty impressive feat in itself. In captivity, that's much more likely to be a bit extended. Obviously, with less stress and a very regular sort of system for providing food, you don't really have to worry about predators. You might see them living 35, 40 years, something like that. Very, very long-lived animals in the greater scheme of things. Yeah, just thinking about that life in captivity thing. Obviously, for many species, a life in a zoo is a much easier existence. Certainly, things like antelope and giraffe. Obviously, things like baboons can live much longer when all of their needs are met in a safe zoo environment. But you look at intelligent animals, things like orcas, and certainly things like elephants. Seem to live 30 to 40% less in captivity. Testament to how inappropriate their presence in zoos actually is. Alrighty, so I think we've actually got a clip from the Saldonio Waterhole to have a look at from yesterday. So let's take a look. Wow, how amazing is that? So nighttime here at Saldonio sees the emergence of a whole host of nocturnal predators. Some of the most spectacular are these lions. And East Africa is famous for some of the greatest densities of big cats on the planet. Certainly one of the best places in the world to come and view lions. Such affectionate interaction. I would reckon this is probably an adult lioness on the left with quite a large subadult cub, almost certainly one of her daughters on the right. And this behavior is called allo grooming, where they kind of take turns licking each other. A bit like you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. And over and above, obviously, maintaining their cleanliness, these grooming sessions are critical for strengthening the bonds within these prides. And taking a look at them, there's no doubt that those bonds exist. Awesome. Nice to see. Pink Ellie, Prairie Dog, everybody liking that a lot. That's awesome. Yeah, it seems to be only recently that we've started kind of sharing these clips on this live at the Waterhole. I think it's a nice change. I like it. Very, very cool. Zim Dutch has asked, do ticks affect the health of any animals? Zim Dutch, they absolutely do. So, obviously, for anybody who doesn't or isn't 100% sure, ticks are a blood-sucking parasite that attaches themselves to many of our animal species out here. Obviously, feasting on that blood, if the animal is small enough and the infestation of ticks is great enough, that can cause a problem because too much blood is being taken out. But a slightly darker side is that ticks also carry quite a few diseases. Things like bilwery is a pretty horrible one affecting carnivorous animals, and it can be really bad in things like lions, leopards, cooters, wild dogs, hyenas, where their immune systems are already a bit worn down, yeah, bilberry can certainly be fatal. It kills domestic dogs as well. Yeah, not great. Thankfully, though, with a nice, healthy ecosystem functioning properly, there are things like oxpeckers to try and lighten the load, and that does seem to keep the system in balance. But there was a horrible situation in, I think, like the 60s and 70s in Africa, with cattle farming being much more prevalent in many of these wild areas, with the chemicals being used on cattle to kill ticks, at the time being extremely lethal to the oxpeckers, which almost disappeared. Thankfully, there was a huge move in those farming communities to phase out the particular type of chemical that was killing all of those birds. And there's one on the shoulder of that impala. And there was a big move to kind of repopulate areas with wild captured oxpeckers. And we've seen huge success. Now, vast improvement. It's amazing what we can do as humans to fix problems that we've caused in nature with a little bit of kind of working together, a synergy, and a bit of scientific organization. The Spas says, wow, amazing, first time seeing lions at night recorded on Old Donyo. What is the species of frog calling? Now, unfortunately, Spas, when we do these live at the Waterhole shows, I don't have the ability as the naturalist narrating to hear any of the audio. So the audio that I'm getting is coming from the director in Johannesburg. So I can't tell you, sadly, what that frog was. We do have some pretty awesome frogs. There's that little ground squirrel just on the edge of the grass. Once again, feeding in a very flattened pile of elephant droppings, where he's almost certainly searching for tasty little morsels that have survived the elephant's digestive process. So elephants, as we know, love to feed on the fruit that grows naturally on a number of the tree species. And with quite a weak digestive system, very often seeds, which contain a protein-rich kernel, pass through undamaged, undigested. And the squirrels will very happily clean all of those up. Thankfully, though, the squirrels don't get to all of the seeds, and in a lot of cases, elephants help with the germination of seeds and the generation of a whole nother system of trees. Incredible to think of the kind of interconnected nature of an ecosystem like this, with many different species relying on one another for their sort of daily needs, their greater functions long term. But it can certainly be pretty disastrous when we pull individual elements out of there, we weaken the fabric, and the whole ecosystem collapses. And that gives rise to the need for kind of umbrella conservation initiatives, conserving the entire ecosystem for the benefit of all species. The beautiful thing, though, is that we do have these iconic species like elephant, like rhino, that attract the funding. So the justification can be for the conservation of one big species, but the benefits that spin off of that kind of ripple through the entire system. Casper says, Old Donyo is like a moving portrait of beauty. Casper, that's very well put. It is such a scenic landscape, and those sort of flat-topped acacia trees. Yeah, what a backdrop when you're looking at things like super tuskers and lions and beautiful Maasai giraffes. It just doesn't get a whole lot better than that. I actually know somebody who works here at Old Donyo, so it is very high up on my list of places to visit. And I would love it. There is so much of Africa that I still want to see. And my hope is that in moving into a role as a conservation pilot up into Africa, I'm hopefully going to get a good opportunity to not only make a difference, but also to see some of these very wild places. Our baboons still on the scene as well. Nice to have them still foraging away out in the long grass. Particularly big male off on the right there. My apologies for any barking you might be able to hear in the background. I've got some primates in my garden in suburban Nelspruit, South Africa, which my dogs are not a huge fan of. I've always really liked how when these baboons are seated, they kind of rest their forearms on their knees. Something very, very human about the way they do that. Take a look at this tiny little infant coming up to have a bit of an interaction with Dad. Yeah, Loyanda, who is our director this afternoon, has also just said to me, how do I feel about captive primates? And yeah, I think my feelings are pretty similar to that of elephants and great whales and things like that in zoos. Certainly for things like lesser primates, I think baboons and monkeys and that sort of thing, and their needs are perhaps more easily met in zoos. But yeah, the more intelligent an animal is, the more suffering there is with a captive existence. So while zoos are absolutely essential for conserving things like endangered birds and frogs and reptiles through their captive breeding and reintroduction programs, they absolutely have value. But we have to consider the cost of keeping these animals in captivity purely for sort of the purposes of human entertainment. We've kind of moved away from circuses now. That was a really positive step in the right direction. People are not really over the hole taking their kids to go and see elephants doing tricks and things like that, because we know that that's an unethical thing. There's lots of suffering. Those animals are beaten in order to train them to perform those silly stunts. But yeah, I think we need to be looking at zoos through more scientific lenses and asking questions like, what is the purpose of having this animal locked up here? Is this conservation? Is this just a money-making scheme? And certainly we don't want to paint all zoos with the same brush. There are lots out there that do good work. And I think for many people, financially, they will probably just never have the opportunity to go out into the wild and see certain animals in their natural habitat. So for that purpose, giving kids the opportunity to view animals and take an interest in the natural world, absolutely, zoos have a purpose. They have a place in our society. But there is a list of wild species, of wild beings, animals with sentience, that we shouldn't be locking up. Tanjay City Rocks says, hello from the Philippines. We have some monkeys here also. Tanjay, what a pleasure to have you coming to us. I don't know if I've ever chatted to somebody from the Philippines here at live at the Waterhole. That might be a first. So that's very cool. And yeah, I believe the Philippines also a beautiful, beautiful place. Lots of natural beauty. Baboon coming down to have a bit of a drink. You might occasionally get a glimpse at those formidable canine teeth we've been talking about. These are powerful animals. It's also reckoned that their muscle density is 7 times greater than a very fit, very healthy human. So it is not too much of a stretch to say a baboon is 6 or 7 times stronger than a human man. They're big, powerful things. Darkmane Lover says, I'm so happy that circuses are no longer used with wild animals. The wild animals all belong their wild freedom. And nicely put, Darkmane Lover. I couldn't agree more. Animals are not for our entertainment. And if we want to be entertained by wildlife, pay the money, fly to somewhere with nature, and go and see them doing their thing out in the wild. Or just watch it here on Wild Earth TV. Tiny little infant there doing a bit of playing under mom's watchful gaze. I think Ellie commenting on how precious these little youngsters are. They're very much like human children. They're super curious, they're very funny, lots of energy. You can literally see him observing things for the first time and learning about the ecosystem, learning about the environment he lives in. But Mum says, playtime is over, let's go. Check that baby out, riding jockey on his mum's back. Focus is a bit tricky with those tall blades of grass there, but hopefully it comes into view. No, just grass. Just quick enough to catch the tail end of them moving away. Now, baboons are quite famous for that bare skin on their bottom, which in the females is also a visual indicator of their readiness to mate. The tissue in that sort of bare patch is connected to her system of internal estrogen, and when her estrogen levels are very elevated, when she's close to estrus, to an egg being released from one of her ovaries, that tissue all becomes very swollen. You get quite a puffy, I think quite revolting looking backside. But apparently to male baboons, that's a very good thing. A visual indicator of a mating opportunity. We don't see the males with very colourful bottoms. These olive baboons do have bare bottoms for the males, but the baboons with the very colourful bums are the mandrill baboons, a cousin of theirs from Central Africa, from the equator. And Lorraine says, thank you very much for an informative show, really enjoyed it. Thanks Lorraine, that's extremely kind of you, and lovely to have had you along for the ride. As I say, we've only got about 10 minutes left of the show. I won't be with you tomorrow, but Ralph will, and I'll be joining you again the day after. So yeah, keep stopping by for more consistent wildlife content from all of our stunning feeds. And Darkman Lover says, I agree with you also, Liam. I enjoy watching the wildlife here with Wild Earth since I'm not able to go to South Africa for now. Brilliant, Darkman Lover. Yeah, it's wonderful to think that this content, this humble content that we do produce, does influence people's lives positively. Yeah, it makes me feel good. Good to hear that. And fingers crossed you can get out to the bush sometime soon. I wish absolutely everybody out there watching the opportunity at least once in their lives to experience African wildlife up close. Looking eye to eye with some of our greatest species. Yeah, it's a life-changing experience. And I think if more of us had that opportunity, we would have far fewer issues with people, sort of misusing the natural world, possibly even with poaching. So travel. If you can, travel. Go and see wild places and wild things. It does look like our impala herd has grown a bit here. Multiple females coming in, almost certainly attracted by the activities of the rutting rams in this open area over the last couple of days. Possibly some opportunities for these males to mate. And they are in tip-top condition. Definitely healthy enough to host some successful pregnancies. So hopefully in about 9 months from now, close to the onset of the rains next wet season, we should be seeing the arrival of a whole new explosion of impala lambs. It's one of the nicest times to be out in the bush. So much life in one frame. Birds, baboons riding jockey. And variety is, after all, the spice of life. Love a bit of diversity. They are so comical. They're very, very vigilant around the water. You can see them almost acting quite nervously. Obviously, this would be a pretty prime spot for a predator to hang out. So, these baboons don't tend to hang around for too long. But the fact that this little grounds is so relaxed is a nice indication that there isn't really anything around. Anything big and dangerous anyway. So I'm being asked, is he using his tail as a seat? I think he probably is. Yeah, he's kind of balancing on it. The tail also functions really, really nicely as a parasol, as kind of an umbrella or a sunshade. When things get really, really hot, he'll kind of arch it all the way along his back up to the top of his head, kind of puff it out. Yeah, a squirrel always carries an umbrella. happily munching away into some sort of nut or seed there. But also keeping a very keen eye out for danger and perhaps a bit safer, just a takeaway there. These squirrels, after all, are very vulnerable to attacks from things like birds of prey. You can see the tiny horns on the head of that slightly smaller impala individual there. And that little, well, not really little, that big lamb is probably a yearling. So from the previous season. Yeah, one of the lucky survivors. And of the tens of thousands of lambs that are born every year, certainly quite a few of them get eaten. Darkmane Lover says, Wild Earth, African and Liam, thank you for another fantastic show live at the Waterholes show. Nice sightings and great knowledge. And have a nice day. Thanks, Darkmane Lover. And we hope to chat to you again sometime soon. Zim Dutch says, good luck for getting your wings tomorrow. Thanks, Zim Dutch. Not quite getting any wings or anything just yet, but the second to last theoretical exam for my common pilot's license. Fingers crossed. But thank you so much. Yeah, I think we've got about 2 minutes left of the show for today. It has been a huge pleasure. I think we've seen a nice variety of kind of big and small. And yeah, I hope many of you can hop back on to another session of Live at the Waterhole same time tomorrow. As I say, fellow Wild Earth naturalist Ralph will be chatting you through these scenes. But otherwise, from the entire Wild Earth team, from Luyanda, who's been very skillfully directing us across our various feeds, for myself, naturalist Liam Burrow, thank you so much for taking the time to have a bit of a listen and to learn something about wildlife and nature. I hope wherever you are in the world, you're having a nice day. Hopefully there's a bit of wildlife in it for you. And we'll chat to you again sometime soon. Cheers for now.